Hello, everyone. My name is Meg Kreis. I am the social worker here at the Carpentersville Police Department. If you have never joined us before, this is a session of Family Matters where we talk about just different hot button topics, different things that are going on in the community, different things that are important to know. And we are very excited today to be joined by Laura Mikolajczyk from the Ecker Center for Behavioral Health there in Elgin. Ecker Center offers all sorts of different services that are available to the community, but today we are specifically going to be talking about suicide and suicide prevention. So Laura, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, of course. I want to thank you for this opportunity. I was so excited to put a presentation together, and I definitely hope that it's helpful.
Thank you.
Well, so I entitled this presentation, Let's Talk About Suicide, because oftentimes suicide is something that we don't want to talk about, right? It's something that's kind of taboo and scary, but it's not going away. It's still here, right, in our world and in our communities. And so I do think it is so important for us to have a frank and open discussion about it. So with that being said, let's get into it. So what is suicidal ideation? Well, we can kind of categorize it into like two chunks. So there's passive suicidal ideation and then active suicidal ideation. So when we're talking about passive suicidal ideation, maybe you wish that you were dead or that you could go to sleep and not wake up, but there's not actually any concrete plans that you're thinking of when it comes to attempting suicide. Then on the other hand, there's active suicidal ideation. So that's, wishing you were dead, having intent to act upon that, and having plans on how to do it, right? So folks who kind of make a note of a bridge that might be near their neighborhood, or folks that start like stockpiling pills just in case. So important to kind of know the difference between those two chunks. So why do people contemplate suicide? Oh gosh, we're going to be unpacking a variety of reasons, but there really are just kind of more reasons than we can even count. This is such a layered thing. A potential reason is mental illness, right? So folks that are already kind of struggling with a pre-existing condition. We named a couple of the diagnoses up there: major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, that sort of thing. But of course, there are many, many more that can be just so overwhelming. Doesn't mean if you have this diagnosis, you're automatically going to contemplate suicide by any means, but it just, is something to keep in mind. Traumatic stress. So trauma is a big thing in our field, and more we're trying to broaden the definition of trauma because it can mean so many things to so many people. But some of the more, I guess, like common examples are things like childhood sexual abuse, rape, physical abuse, war trauma. So definitely lots of different traumatic things that people can encounter. Substance use. So substance use, unfortunately, has absolutely increased thanks to our friend and foe, COVID. People are sad, they're stressed, they're bored, and so it's tempting to self-medicate. But as we know, substance use is only a very, very temporary solution, and it can absolutely lead to further loss. So something to keep in mind as well. Speaking of loss, so loss again can mean so many different things, not just loss of, a loved one, for example. It can be things like academic failure, right? Loss of good grades or the goal to get a diploma, being arrested or imprisoned, loss of freedom. Bullying, shaming, humiliation, that's loss too. That's loss of social connectivity. And just a host of other kind of loss-related situations that are definitely so tough for people. Then there's hopelessness. So the definition technically of hopelessness is the feeling or condition of having no hope. So kind of how I like to conceptualize that is the attitude of like, what's the point, right? What's the point in trudging through another day, another week, another month? Hopelessness is a tough one. It can be short term, right? We all go through seasons of our lives where we're feeling more hopeful or less hopeful. It can also be situational, right? Something bad happens that kind of triggers that hopelessness. It can also be a long-term trait, right? We've all got traits that we like about ourselves, traits that we struggle with. So that can be just kind of a built-in trait for some people. Chronic pain and illness, just so difficult to live with, right? Day in and day out being uncomfortable, and just kind of all the different difficulties that go along with that. So we listed some, I guess, kind of common chronic pain, illness type diagnoses, but of course there are loads more. And then feeling like a burden to others, right? Which can often come with chronic pain or a terminal illness. It's not that person's fault, right? But they can start feeling a sense of guilt. Like I always need help with things, or, my loved ones have to devote so much of their time to helping me. And, that can definitely be hard for people to struggle with. Social isolation, another one that has definitely been out and about thanks to COVID. So it can be, things like someone passing away, separating, moving, retiring. But then, of course, we know that we have lovely technology platforms, right? Like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, texting, Skyping, that sort of thing. But it can still feel kind of isolating. So very difficult for people to feel connected right now. Kind of going along with our COVID theme of the day, this has been and continues to be a tough time for absolutely everyone, right? Nobody is in this alone. We're all kind of feeling that COVID fatigue, right? Like, when is this ever going to be over? So it's difficult for everyone, but especially individuals with pre-existing mental health conditions, individuals having to quarantine in unsafe homes, right? Where there might be domestic violence or things like that kind of going on behind closed doors. And of course, individuals who everything was going fine and now all of a sudden COVID hit and I'm losing a job, losing a loved one. Things are just kind of all chaotic and up in the air. So hard for so many people. So specific populations that appear to be at a higher risk for experiencing suicidal ideation during COVID are young adults, essential workers, racial and ethnic minorities, and unpaid adult caregivers. So we're going to unpack each of those groups a little bit more in the next couple slides. So young adults. As we know, like for our kiddos, adolescents, young adults, and their caregivers, right? This has been an absolutely wild time for everybody. And particularly, young adults are in such an interesting stage of their life, right? Where it's supposed to be this period of exciting transitions, going to college, maybe getting your master's degree, entering the workforce, even things like graduation ceremonies, prom, that sort of thing, that all of a sudden those aren't a guarantee anymore, or just, very much less of a guarantee. So for many, this can leave young adults kind of scrambling and wondering what to do next and kind of feeling cheated out of those experiences. Essential workers. So I think it's so important for all of us to remember that in addition to doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals, there are so many other essential workers that have been and continue to be the unsung heroes of COVID, right? Folks at the grocery stores, at the banks, maintenance staff, right? I have been constantly absolutely amazed by the maintenance staff at Sherman Hospital, for example. Once a patient is discharged, they're going in there, in a arguably contaminated environment and cleaning it up to help serve the community and people in need. So, so important that we remember to really thank our essential workers on all fronts. For essential workers, though, there's that lack of job security, right? Am I the next one that's going to be cut? Paid sick leave, other benefits. So it kind of puts them in a tough position. Should I show up to work even though I'm not feeling 100%, or should I stay home but then lose money? This next one, I know that I struggled with this a lot. Many essential workers fear bringing COVID home to their loved ones, right? And kind of that guilt and that, feeling of being unsure. So those are, two of our groups. Racial and ethnic minorities, so they are more likely to be low-wage essential workers and are also, studies show, are dying at higher rates from COVID-19 than their white counterparts. And this is, due to a host of multi-layered reasons, but just something for us to keep in mind. Unpaid adult caregivers, right? So folks that still need our help and need our care. That stress of, what if my loved one gets sick, right? They're already compromised, and what if this is the next thing that hits? Or, what if they have COVID, our loved one, right? You're put in a place of like, well, now what do? I can't just bail on this person, but also, there's no easy solution. So definitely so hard in particular for those groups. So warning signs. These are not, of course, all of the warning signs available, but these are definitely things for us to keep in mind. I will say that when it comes to warning signs, it's important to have the context of like, is this uncharacteristic for the individual? So giving away possessions, for example, I think we all know some folks that are just like tremendously generous, right? That phrase of like, oh, they give you the shirt off their back. And so those folks, that might be just a normal characteristic for them, in which case it might not be a warning sign. But if that's uncharacteristic for someone, that's definitely something to make note of. So warning signs include, isolating. Again, there's that hopelessness, talking about death or suicide, showing that it's on their mind, giving away possessions when it's uncharacteristic. Again, there's our substance use or misuse, increasing mood swings, anger, irritability. So just having a hard time regulating. Engaging in risk-taking behaviors, kind of like that attitude of let's roll the dice, whatever happens, happens. Accessing means such as medication, drugs, or a firearm. All of a sudden, my loved one is really preoccupied with getting access to a gun, or like, wow, they're really stockpiling a lot of meds. And whenever I offer to dispose of them, they always have a reason, that sort of thing. Acting as if saying goodbye to people. This is a tough one to really put your thumb on, because I don't even know how to fully describe this, except just kind of the feeling of having a conversation with someone and ending it with like, that felt weird, right? That felt not like it was just the end of a conversation, but sort of like the end of our rapport or future interactions, just feeling kind of like that gut feeling that something's not right. I know that, for some folks, warning signs can be maybe hard to spot, right? Or hindsight might be 20/20. That's okay. Just something for us to, continuously learn and keep in the back of our minds. So what to do if you're contemplating suicide? Get immediate help, right? Not in an hour, not the next day, not the next week, right now. It's so important that you have immediate access to the care that you need and, quite frankly, the care that you deserve. Call 911 or your local emergency number. I even recommend that people program their local emergency number into their phone, right? So rather than kind of hunting for it on the internet last minute, you can just, click your contacts list and there it is. Call a suicide hotline. So we'll be giving examples of suicide hotlines later on in our presentation. Call your mental health provider, your doctor, another healthcare provider that you trust. Loop in your loved ones who want to support you. Reach out to your spiritual leaders and your spiritual community. So many resources for folks, and even if things are feeling helpless, you can get help. So just so important to always remember that. Learn coping strategies. So oftentimes that is easier said than done. But the good news is you don't have to go it alone. I myself tend to struggle with anxiety, and I see a therapist every other week. She's fantastic. I've been seeing her for years because she'll notice things that I don't notice, or she'll think of things that I wouldn't think of. It's just so important that we all feel like we're getting support, whether that's from our natural supports or paid supports. Doctors, mental health providers are specifically trained to be able to identify coping strategies. And not only that, but coping strategies that are tailored to your specific needs. So we've kind of got those like blanket coping strategies, right? Things like doing yoga, deep breathing, reading, journaling. And while those are all fantastic tools and definitely things you should, try out, they might not be ideal for what you need or for what works for you. So it's so important to explore specifically what works for you and what can make things feel better. Create a written plan of action. So oftentimes we've just got so many thoughts and feelings buzzing around that it can be so important to take those and actually put them on paper so we can just better organize and track all of that stuff. So this can be a checklist of different activities and actions that you can do to stay safe when you start having those thoughts. So things like stick with your prescribed treatment plan, which is again, often easier said than done, but so important that you and your prescriber are, on the same page. Keep a list of contact names and numbers readily available, whether that's in a, kind of card in your wallet or something posted up by your bedside or just programmed into your phone. Remove potential means of killing yourself. So for example, people that stockpile meds, you can turn those into the Elgin Police Department, for example, or I know like different Walgreens facilities have kind of like those med disposal like bins where meds can be safely disposed of at no cost to you. So important to know those resources in your community. Schedule daily activities. Again, so important during COVID because I know for me and I hope for other people so that I'm not alone, I doubt I am, the days can feel like they're blurring together, right? Well, what day of the week is it? And things just feel monotonous and the same. So try to break that up. Try to break up the monotony, schedule daily activities, try to create some of that structure again. Spend time with others in a safe way. There are support groups out there. Again, there's that avoiding drugs and alcohol when possible. And of course, journaling your thoughts and feelings. So again, getting that stuff that's swirling around your head and your heart on paper or on a computer screen or whatever works for you. So what to do if a loved one is contemplating suicide? Ask direct questions, which can be difficult to do, right? People can be nervous about maybe offending someone or alienating someone, but direct questions are important in order to get answers that are needed. So some examples of direct questions might be like, are you thinking about dying? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? This one is so important. So asking about suicidal thoughts or feelings will not increase someone's chances of attempting suicide. Rather, offering an opportunity to discuss these thoughts may reduce the risk of someone acting on suicidal feelings. This, myth that, talking about it makes people more inclined to act upon it, that is a myth that needs to go away because it's simply not true. You know, as uncomfortable as it might be for, you know, us as loved ones to speak to somebody about suicide, it's probably equally uncomfortable for that person to speak about it, right? Worrying that they'll freak people out, right? Worrying that the person won't understand them, that sort of thing. So it's so important that we just try our best to create that atmosphere of an open dialogue. Look for warning signs like we discussed earlier, and offer support. This can be things like encouragement, right? So encouraging the person to call a suicide hotline or seek treatment. It can also be so helpful to offer, you know, assistance with taking steps to get that support. So oftentimes if somebody's contemplating suicide, things can feel kind of chaotic, out of control, and just very overwhelming. So even something as simple as like, hey, you know, let's sit down and make this phone call together. Just kind of, you know, helps make things seem more manageable. Always be respectful, acknowledge the person's feelings, avoid being judgmental, right? So it can be kind of tempting for us if someone starts maybe talking about suicide to shut it down, right? Like, oh, no, you know, you don't want to do that, or let's not, you know, let's not talk about that. Again, because it's uncomfortable, but then that message is saying, you know, hey, like your thoughts and your feelings aren't valid, and I'm not here to support you, right? Even if that's not our intent. So important to just kind of have that respectful space. Never promise to keep someone's suicidal feelings a secret, because that is a promise that you can't and shouldn't keep, right? And that's so hard if you have somebody saying, you're the only person I've told, like, please don't tell anyone. If you tell so-and-so, they'll be so upset. It can be so hard to look that person in the eye and say, I'm sorry, I can't make that promise, right? But it's better for everyone to set that boundary now than to promise and have to break that promise later. So important. Offer reassurance that things can get better, because they can, right? It might not be apparent right away. It might, you know, take a lot of hard work and digging, but things can get better. Encouraging the person to avoid that substance use, and helping them remove potentially dangerous items from the home. And just absolutely positively take all signs of suicidal behavior seriously, right? Sometimes I feel like people can worry that they're, you know, overreacting or blowing things out of proportion. But when it comes to something as serious and as permanent as suicide, it's better to be quote unquote too cautious than, you know, not cautious enough. So what to do if somebody has attempted suicide? Call 911 or that local emergency number right away so they can get paramedics on scene. Whenever possible, don't leave the person alone, right? So if your phone is in the other room and you have to run to go get it, right? Do what you got to do, but just try not to leave the person alone if possible. And try to find out if the person is under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or may have taken an overdose. When those kind of substances are on board, our body tends to start to shut down. And so while the person's still awake and responsive, it's important to try to get that information so that you know what to tell paramedics when they get there. Now, petition. So petition for involuntary/judicial admission. So this is a document that can be found by that link above. You can also just go to Google and type in like involuntary petition DHS Illinois, and it should pop up. So a petition is a legal document. It can be filled out by anyone over the age of 18, well, 18 and over. And essentially, it is designed to get the individual from point A to point B. So point A being where they currently are in the community. So whether that's at the Ecker Center, whether that's at home or at school, it's designed to get them from there to a secure location, meaning a hospital emergency department, where they can get a level of care assessment. So just because a petition is completed, that does not mean that automatically that person is going to be psychiatrically hospitalized, right? Rather, it's just a vehicle to get that person at least from point A to point B for an evaluation. So petitions are kind of, at least for me, scary looking. A lot of, legal jargon and words that initially I wasn't all that familiar with. But if you want more information or guidance on how to fill one out, you can contact our psychiatric emergency program, which operates 24/7, 365 days a year, located at Sherman Hospital. There's the number. Our psychiatric emergency program staff are pros at completing petitions and at guiding other people to fill out petitions. So definitely a good resource. So what happens when I arrive at the emergency department or the ED? I do want to make a note that not all hospitals operate the exact same way, right? So this is kind of like a general overview of what usually happens. So you'll be admitted to the emergency department and medically cleared to make sure that, if there's physical health stuff going on or if there are substances on board, as we know, those can definitely affect our mental well-being. Then you'll meet with an ED therapist or social worker or counselor, kind of sometimes interchangeable terms as far as titles in this field, to get some background information on how you've been feeling lately, right? What led up to you arriving at the emergency department? Why now? What brought you here today? And then how you're currently feeling, just lots of good information taking. Then your ED therapist, social worker, counselor will then consult with your ED treatment team because you will have a treatment team made up of a doctor, an assigned nurse, a charge nurse, right? It's definitely a team decision to determine the appropriate level of care. So usually, right, in most circumstances, you will either be discharged with appropriate resources for your location, insurance, and needs. So meaning you were determined by your treatment team to not be an acute risk to yourself or others. Or you could be psychiatrically hospitalized, meaning that your treatment team has determined that you are an acute risk to yourself or others. This process can be scary and overwhelming, and that's okay. Hospitals are just places that oftentimes people don't want to be, right? It's not, the Four Seasons, right? But it is a place that's safe. And, above all else, your safety and getting the support that you need. And again, deserve is just the, utmost goal. So resources. We've got loads of wonderful resources out there, oftentimes resources that operate 24/7. So under these various resources, I've put like their website, phone numbers. Some of them, like the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, offer like an online chat. The Veterans Crisis Line can even offer support via text. SAMHSA, so Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration in particular, is a cool one because it navigates what we call like co-occurring disorders. So meaning mental health challenges and substance challenges, right? So whether that's, the mental health stuff is causing me to self-medicate, or my substance use is now causing mental health issues, or both, or a mix of the two, that can be a great resource. Then the crisis text line, it's so funny because some folks, when you give them different resources, they're like, why would I want to text somebody? I want to pick up the phone and call them. And then you'll have some being like, I don't want to have to call somebody. Can't I just text? Right? So again, it's just whatever works best for you. Then, of course, there's the Ecker Center for Behavioral Health located in Elgin. That's our website and main number. And as mentioned earlier, we do have our psychiatric emergency program, one of the programs that I oversee. It's located at Sherman Hospital, adjacent, not quite in the emergency department, but right next door. So I recommend that you visit, or so I listed a different phone number earlier, but here's an additional phone number. Both will go to the same place, so feel free to call either phone number. Then there's NAMI, so the National Alliance on Mental Illness. This is a wonderful resource, not only for folks that they themselves struggle with mental health issues, but also for loved ones that are feeling alone, or like they're not doing it right, whatever that means, right? Or they're just feeling like they want more support. I highly recommend that website. It's really, really wonderful. And then Saving Ourselves from Suicide by Linda Pacha. I apologize, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. This is my own personal recommendation. This book came across my desk, and one Sunday I sat down with the intent to read maybe a couple chapters, and I did not look up until I had read the whole book cover to cover. I just think it's fantastic. So an additional resource. And that's my presentation for today. I so appreciate your time and again, this opportunity, and I do hope it's helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. This was so much great information. I am sure our community will really take advantage of all this information. For those of you viewing, I will be putting the link for the petition for the state of Illinois, along with the phone number for Quadcom, which is our emergency dispatcher locally, into the information section on the video, so that you have that number and that information all easily accessible. I will also put the information for all of the crisis lines and the suicide hotline, all of that information, so it's as easily acceptable as possible. Please note, as a message from our police department and from our fire department, if you guys ever need anything, that is why we are here. We will always come out. We will always want to be called. We would rather be called multiple times when somebody's considering something versus called when something's already been done. So please do not hesitate to call us. That is why we are here. Okay, Laura, thank you so much for your time and all of this wonderful information.
Thank you.